What's up, guys? This is Bolt Struck with Duck, and we're going over an embarrassing start to the Chargers free agency. So yeah, I am recapping day one of free agency, trying to get this video out quick before day two starts popping off. And popping off for the Chargers would be signing a over-the-hill veteran backup fullback, right? In comparison to what happened day one. But jokes aside, I see Chargers fans are divided on this start. And, it's good to be optimistic. I think there's no way around the fact that this was an embarrassing day one, especially considering how much money the Chargers had to spend. Going into it, third most cap space, over $90 million. So let's start with the positives. Khalil Mack is back on a fantastic deal, $18 million for a leader who still has production left in him. I'm a big fan of re-signing fan favorites, especially ones that still produce, on smart contracts. And re-signing Tahir Tart, I wish it was more than a one-year deal. I think in a limited role he proved it, but glad to have him back for the season. Now on to the negatives. So despite having $90 million in cap space, the Chargers lost out on some of the top offensive linemen to teams like the Bears, who have less cap space than the Chargers. And they've missed out on a couple top-tier defensive linemen, including their own and Poona Ford. That one hurt. To me, a 3-year contract under $10 million a year, I think he more than proved it. The only way that move is salvageable to me from Joe Hortiz is if he goes and signs one of the top remaining defensive tackles for a similar deal, because we know Joe Hortiz loves his comp picks. So if you're able to get similar production at a similar value plus the comp pick, then that's 3D chess. That's smart. I get it. And for those of you that don't know, you're awarded comp picks basically for having players leave. And there's basically a calculation of that I'm not smart enough to get into, but essentially that's how it works. And Joe Hortiz famously loves trying to use these loopholes. To me, it's kind of why last year we had this weird move of like Gerald Everett left and then signing like worse tight ends. And, that's Joe Ortiz's thing. But so enough about that. So that Poona Ford move hurt. So you guys know that's someone I wanted back. And then a couple interesting pickups. So they picked up a corner from the Steelers who is a undersized, ball-hawking corner who cannot tackle. And if that sounds familiar, yes, that is a older, worse Asante Samuel Jr. So, weird. Maybe we won't question it too much because Jesse Minter showed with Christian Fulton last year that he can take maybe a project corner or not so good corner and turn him into a solid caliber starting corner. This one's a little weirder because he has probably higher upside, but there is some downside. Again, we'll see how much Asante Samuel Jr. signs for. Maybe it's the market that's confusing Chargers fans. Maybe it's inflated, but if Asante Samuel Jr. would have came back on a similar deal, then might as well keep the continuity. You know what I mean? And Asante Samuel Jr. has shown flashes of stardom. So that's what I would have done. And speaking of kind of lateral moves, same thing. Chargers pick up Najee Harris. That's the big one. This move is strange to me for a few reasons. So in Ortiz's defense, he is probably a healthier version of J.K. Dobbins at this point, where both of them probably would have finished with over 1,000 yards per season. In Najee Harris's defense, he has finished with 1,000 yards, I believe, every season of his career. But he is a workhorse, essentially. He's not a high yards per carry guy. He's not an explosive guy. He will get you 65 yards a game, 17 games a week. So you could argue that's better than J.K. Dobbins, but maybe doesn't have quite the upside as J.K. Dobbins. He is young, so it's possible he gets better, but just barely 1,000 yards going into this Chargers team with a horrendous interior offensive line, and the fact that this is a 1-year deal, which to me is like, if Najee isn't your long-term solution at running back, then I would assume you're going to draft one. Then why wouldn't you have just re-signed J.K. Dobbins for probably a similar deal, if not cheaper, assuming J.K., with his injury history, would rather stay here. I'm sure teams aren't going to offer him a crazy deal. So that's a little weird to me. I don't hate Najee Harris. It's just with $90 million, you expect some splash moves. And then not to mention, they missed out on all the top wide receivers, even the ones where it was a slam dunk to get, like Devontae Adams basically saying he wants to go to the Chargers, DK Metcalf basically saying he wants to go to the Chargers. And before I get too negative, I do want to talk about the fact that, people always say things along the lines of, well, you're not an NFL GM, trust Joe Hortiz, blah, blah, blah. In any industry, any job, these are still people, and people make mistakes. And just because I'm not a professional, just because a random Chargers fan on Twitter is not a professional, doesn't mean they can't be right. Professionals make mistakes. Non-professionals can make correct calls as well. So all that to say, free agency's not over. I'm not out on Joe Hortiz. He's already far surpassed Tom Telesco in terms of drafting and in-season moves and rotating in depth pieces and churning the back into the roster. But, you got to sign someone. It's just such a waste of Justin Herbert, where it's like you see the Texans, the Vikings, the Bears, all in similar situations. Young QBs are spending money on O-line, D tackles, wide receivers. And it's like the Chargers have more money, in my opinion, a better quarterback. It's like you got to get them some weapons. Using Greg Roman's scheme to not get receivers and to get, kind of a more bruiser back in Najee Harris, that's not an excuse. Randy Moss would be good in anyone's scheme, right? And on that tangent, the Chargers have historically been a classy organization. They don't take, bad-tempered players, essentially, but it does go too far sometimes. It's nice to have good guys to root for on the team, but it's like, it's like if prime Jerry Rice was available right now and they found out he cheated on an English test in 3rd grade, they'd be out on him. You know what I mean? It's like, it's to a fault sometimes, where it's like, gosh, like some of these other teams are signing, not necessarily this year, but historically, these incredibly talented players, signing or trading for them on really good contracts or deals just because they have issues and they end up being fantastic. And it's like, nobody even talks about the issues like a Tyreek Hill has, at least to the extent of like people are easy to forgive that because he's been so good, things like that. So kind of tangential, but basically need to see some splash pickups, oh my gosh. And re-signing J.K. Scott and Bradley Bozeman. I mean, Bradley Bozeman, we better hope that's paying him as a backup center because he's a good guy. And then J.K. Scott, I get the hang time, but the dude can't punt more than 45 yards if his life depended on it. So, that's weird. Of like the 4 people they've re-signed, 2 of them were, in my opinion, the worst Chargers on the roster, the worst starting Chargers. But, got to see a splash move. We need a center, or get me an interior offensive lineman at least, and then we need a threat. Might as well bring back Keenan Allen at this point and some sort of tight end. Let's get a interior offensive lineman, a D tackle, Keenan Allen, some sort of tight end. That's what I'd like to see over today and tomorrow. But let me know down in the comments below. A to F grade, what would you rate the start of Chargers free agency? I would definitely say a D minus, especially factoring how much money they had. But again, let me know in the comments down below. Going to keep you guys updated on Chargers free agency. Make sure to like the video if you like the video and subscribe for more Chargers content. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.